What's up, fellow adult collectors? Welcome to SeViLion Collectibles. In this video, I'll be talking about the NECA Ultimate Real Toys Marty McFly and Biff Tannen based on their appearances in Back to the Future 2. There have been two other versions of Marty released based on Part 1, but since my favorite of the trilogy is Part 2, that's the one I got. Most of this line will be available anywhere NECA products are sold, but Marty in the hazmat suit is exclusive to Target. There is also a DeLorean available, but it is not in scale with these figures. If this is your first time landing on my channel, hi, my name is SeViL, and here I like to discuss action figures and other collectibles based on my favorite movies, TV shows, and video games. If you find this video enjoyable or informative, please give me a thumbs up, don't forget to subscribe, and hit that notification bell. First up, I'm going to start this off with a good, slow, up and down look at Marty. For the most part, NECA has done what they've always done, and knocked it out of the park as far as the detail and overall look of the character. This figure absolutely looks like it walked straight out of the Back to the Future 2 version of 2015. However, I do have to agree with at least one collective community gripe. The Michael J. Fox face sculpt does look a little weird. It's not entirely wrong, like, I can see Michael J. Fox's likeness in there, it's just not as prominent as I think it should be. Different angles and lighting do kind of help the situation, which leads me to think it's more to do with the paint and coloring rather than the sculpt itself. You know how in Part 2 Michael had to play both Marty and Marty Jr., but as Marty Jr. they applied some sort of makeup or different effects to make him look a little bit different? That's what this makes me think of. Everything else though looks great and exactly as it did in the movie. The jacket, the jeans, the shoes, everything looks perfect. I'm going to need Hasbro to take some notes and understand that this is how jeans are supposed to look, not whatever that was on the X-Men movie Wolverine figures. While I've got the camera down here, since the shoes were a pretty prominent piece of the attire from this movie, here's a quick shot of them. It's just too bad they couldn't get the rights to the Nike logo. The back side of the figure also looks really good, with no real issues for me to make note of. So with all that out of the way, now I'll show you his accessories. He does get a second head sculpt without the hat, but it does still mostly suffer from the same lightness problems. He also has an open grip style hand that can be swapped out to hold different accessories. One of those being the Pepsi bottle, and the other being the hoverboard. I'll come back to the hoverboard in just a minute. The Pepsi bottle looks really good, and even includes the little tube that he gets it from. Although, without a diorama of the cafe he was in, I don't really know what you would do with the tube, because he didn't really carry that around. The main attraction for me, though, is the hoverboard itself. It looks absolutely perfect, with the only real change being that the Mattel logo is now the NECA logo. The undercarriage is no different. No detail has been left out. To make the board work with the figure, there's two parts that can be swapped out. The base on the bottom, and the foot piece on the top. Take the regular one out, put the foot peg in, and then you can have Marty stand on it. Then for the base on the bottom, you take the flatter one out, and put the bigger one in, and that holds on to the little flight stand. Since the stand acts like a ball joint, you can pretty much tilt the board any direction you'd like. Of course, that does also depend on balancing Marty onto the board, but, in all honesty, he balances better on the flight stand and board than he does just standing on the ground. With all that said, I'm going to move Marty over to talk about Biff, but later on I will bring Marty back to do both of their articulation segments in the same shots. Now, with Biff in place, I'll go back to that nice, slow, up and down look of both the front and back. For the most part, a lot of my description of Marty also applies to Biff. He looks like he walked straight out of 1955 from Back to the Future 2. Technically, Biff could be from Part 1 or 2 because this is the outfit he wore at the dance in both Parts 1 and 2. I do think that the face sculpt here is still fairly accurate, but again, the coloring just kills me. Everything else, though, is pretty much spot on. The torso part of the jacket is a softer, more malleable material, just like it was on Marty. It being an outer layer really helps add to the overall depth of the aesthetic. The jeans are once again another prime example of exactly what jeans are supposed to look like. That same high level of detail does carry around to the back side, with, once again, no notable problems to mention. Moving on to Biff's accessories, he does get an extra head that can be swapped out, with this one being more of an angry yelling face. He also gets two fist hands and one grabber hand for the right side. Other accessories include the flyer for the dance, the receipt for his car repair, and of course, the sports almanac and the safe. The safe and the almanac are fully detailed all the way around, but the flyer and the receipt are plain paper on the back. The almanac itself does fit nicely into Biff's right grabber hand. Now, With Marty back in, I'm going to do a quick size comparison between the two. No, Marty is not that tall compared to Biff. That's Marty on the hoverboard stand. Without it, Biff is about an inch taller than Marty. In fact, Biff comes in at about 7.5 inches tall, and Marty is about 6.5. It's not exactly that, but it's pretty close. That does seem about right to me, because Michael J. Fox is only 5'4", and the guy playing Biff is 6'2". Now, as I said earlier, I'm going to do the articulation for both figures at the same time. The heads are on ball pegs, which gives them a decent range up and down, a little bit of a tilt, and of course 4 rotations side to side. The shoulders can spin all the way around, but don't have a lot of range moving backwards. The elbows are double jointed, plus each segment can rotate independently. Of course, the wrists also have 4 rotation with a decent range of up and down movement. Marty doesn't seem to have any articulation in the torso as far as I can tell. There may be something underneath the red shirt, but if there is, it's really tight. Biff, however, does have the upper ball joint underneath the chest and a full tornado waist. Their hips can spread out sideways pretty far, but neither one would ever stand up like this on their own. Their knees are only single jointed, but they do have rotation at that point, and the ankles do have a full pivot motion. So, with all that said, it's time to run this NECA Ultimate Marty McFly and Biff Tannen through my guidelines for a complete and fair review. These are brand new sculpts that are highly detailed, but unfortunately not entirely accurate to the likeness of the actors themselves. However, they are in scale with each other and come with plenty of accessories tied to the movie. Back to the negative side though, the articulation is not quite where I would like it to be, and I do think that leads to some of the balance issues. Beyond that, I did not have any quality control problems with either of mine. I do think the roughly $30 price point is fair for NECA in general, and finally, at the time of this recording, these figures should be readily available at most stores. Leading my final score to a 7 out of 10 star rating, meaning they are still pretty amazing and worth owning for all fans of the franchise. So, while these aren't perfect, they are absolutely the best and most realistic Back to the Future figures we've ever gotten. I don't see myself needing to be a completist on this line, but I'll still get Doc Brown when he's released, and then just kind of go from there, but based on whatever else they come out with. Up until this year, I didn't know I needed a Back to the Future section in my collection, but now that I've got it, it'll make a nice little corner on one of my shelves. Therefore, if you're also a fan of these movies, then I highly recommend adding these figures to your collection.